I know we have limited time thank you, for, for the rest of the presentation, so I'm going to try and go through this quickly. As you can see from the title, I'm going to talk about something that might generate some controversy, and I like good kind of controversy, so finger crossed. I want to start with a question. And my question is, when we hear someone say in public, admonish another person, say, speak English, you're in America, we are appalled, right? Or at least we should be. Yeah. And yet, in our own college classrooms here in the US, we tell our students, this is an American class, speak English only, or some variation of that. My question is why? Why should voicing English proficiency be equal to silencing another language? Why should acquiring English proficiency be equal to giving up the ownership over other languages? And why should English proficiency be equal to language X, Y, and or Z deficiency? So why do I ask this question? Because as you might tell, I'm from India. I grew up in a place which is multilingual, multicultural, sometimes crazily so. When I first came to the US to pursue higher education in 2004, I was repeatedly given the impression, directly and indirectly, by the people around me here in this country that the US was a monolingual country. And because I came from a different place, I didn't really buy into that. And I realized that no, the US, this country is very multilingual and very multicultural. And maybe it's because in the last couple of decades, this country has been changing so rapidly. So this is backed by data. If you look at the graph on the screen, the US landscape is changing. It's becoming more visibly, and I would say audibly, multilingual and multicultural. So this is from a news article that was published recently. There's a growing linguistic diversity in the US. In 1980, when this data was collected, the percentage of people, the US residents over age 5, who spoke a language other than English at home was far lower. Now, as recent as 2016, it was 21.6%. That means more than 1 in 5 person that you know in this country speaks a language other than English at home. US citizens age 18 or older, 15.3% people, according to this poll, speak a language other than English at home. And other than English does not mean they don't speak English at home. It means that they speak at least another language at home, maybe in addition to English. And yet, despite this linguistic diversity in our classrooms, those languages tend to be silent, and I would argue that they're silenced. Why? So that was my question. Now, I want to talk about community colleges specifically. Historically, community colleges like Montgomery College have been serving the community. They've been attracting minority students. More recently, they've also been attracting immigrant and international students, and I would also say faculty and staff. And these are among the most diverse higher education settings in the US. Therefore, our goals need to evolve. They need to change. We are working, living, and surviving in a globalized world. In order to make sure that our students survive and thrive, we have to make sure that they are translingual. This is a term that I use, which means they should be able to use codes from different languages in contextually appropriate ways. For example, I'm being translingual right now. I can speak more than one language, but I'm speaking the common language in this room, English. But if I were speaking to Dr. Sanjay Rai, if he were in the room, and it was just the two of us having a conversation, we might be switching back and forth between English and Hindi. So that's translingual. We need to make sure our students are interculturally competent. That means that they can recognize and navigate cultural boundaries successfully, and that they can demonstrate global competences. According to Asia Society, that means that students can investigate the world, recognize and weigh perspectives, communicate ideas, and take action. And I just want to emphasize that Montgomery College in particular is a very, very diverse college. How do I know that? Here's an example. This is from IIE, the Institute of International Education. They collect data about international students every year from around the country. According to their site, Montgomery College was number 6 last year in the number of international students who come here to study. That's pretty amazing. This is from Montgomery College's own website. I call it a super diverse context. According to the Chronicle of Higher Education last year, Montgomery College was racially and ethnically the most diverse community college in continental US. The top 5 or 6 above Montgomery College were all in Hawaii. And you can see this is from Montgomery College at a glance. You can search for this document on the course on the college website. You can see the diversity of the students in terms of ethnicity as well as residency status. And if that's not enough, according to Community College Review, Montgomery College has a diversity score of 0.78, which is higher than any other community college in Maryland. So you can see the blue line is Montgomery College, the red line are the rest of the community colleges in this state. So let's talk about translingually responsive pedagogy. Now, I did not choose a strategy for my project in this program. Part of it is because I have a research background, a practitioner research background, and I've been theorizing about this. I call it translingually responsive pedagogy. So I used the opportunity last year to actually go deeper into this theorizing that I'm doing. So because we have limited time, I'm going to focus on 3 aspects. One, when I say TRP, it focuses on communicative competence, not replacement of one language or language variety with another language or language variety. So I am not teaching my students how to speak like an American. I am not reducing their accent. I am not replacing their accent. I don't speak with an American accent, but I think I'm proficient in English. So I expect my students to be able to do that too. So I try to do that without denigrating, devaluing anybody's language or language variety. So I do realize that linguistic contexts are inequitable, especially in academic settings, which means standard English is considered more important in a college setting. So I know it is important to teach all students the code of what is valued as standard and correct in academic settings, but to do so in a way that doesn't discriminate or devalue who our students are. Another way to make sense of TRP is to think about English as a pluricentric language, which means English has many centers around the world. There are many standard Englishes. There are also variations in English language codes, histories, and cultures. Think about Black English, for example. We have standard American English, then we have African American English. Both are Englishes, and both are equally valid and viable. So another aspect of TRP is that it challenges linguicism. And what is linguicism? Just like racism, linguicism is discrimination based on language and the idea that a language variety is more correct or more important than another. So my example of African American English versus standard English, but because I teach academic English in the ELAP program here, and I work a lot with immigrant students who speak other languages, I'll also give the example of English versus Spanish. So the use of any language should feel like a choice, not an imposition. For me, that's the meaning of freedom. So what does it look like in the classroom? Theory is good, but how do you actually apply it in the classroom? I have 3 examples here. One, I raise my students' awareness of language use. So I talk about variations within English. I tell them there's a word aluminum, but there's also another word aluminium, and both are correct. Half of the world says aluminum, the other half says aluminium, and they can still talk to each other and make sense. I talk about ways of organizing information, which are often culturally diverse. For example, in the Western context, here, especially in the US, students need to know how to organize information using linear logic, from general to specific, from most important to less important, from main, major to minor, and so forth. But in other cultures, we don't use that logic. In other cultures, we talk about using a more circular logic, where you lead your audience up to your thesis. It's considered presumptuous if you just right away give your thesis or your main idea. Right. So I also plan classroom conversations. I encourage students to use all languages responsibly. So what that means is I facilitate inclusive communication when working in small groups. Where's Bruce? So working in small groups. So when I give my students small group activities, sometimes I group them according to common language. So if 3 of my students are Francophone, they come from French-speaking backgrounds, I'll put them in a small group together. And I tell them, you're allowed to use French as well as English. Know that the final output has to be in academic English. and they figure it out. What happens is, as a result, there's a natural shift from a common home language to the target language. And it doesn't feel imposed upon. It feels like a choice for them. I also design my course assignments that brings out students' identity, their background. For example, I ask them what home means to them. And they also do presentations where they can bring in information from their background. Now, I know I'm out of time, so I'm just going to go over this very, very quickly. The impact: it builds students' confidence. It engages students in the learning and acquisition of academic English more deeply. And it prepares students for global realities. It builds upon their global competence. So, next steps: what's the outcome or the assessment of that? I'm actually working on a textbook right now, which is going to be a complement to the course site. This is the work in progress cover. I'm using a free website called Press Books. So once the textbook is complete, hopefully by the end of summer, it will be open access, which means students would not have to pay a cent to use this textbook. They'll be able to download it in different formats. And my colleagues would also be able to use this textbook and adapt it to their own pedagogical contexts. Thank you.